Hello, everyone. Welcome to this workshop. This is a re-recording of the April 5th live workshop on ArcGIS Online. Because it was a live workshop, there were many pauses due to the questions. So I re-recorded so it can be a better resource for reference and review for those who attended, as well as for those who view it for the first time. I will explain a little more for the areas that people had most difficulties during the workshop. So in this workshop, we will cover the following topics. First, we will look at what is ArcGIS Online. Then we will explore the ArcGIS Online user interface. Next, we will look at how to bring data into ArcGIS Online and make a web map using that data. Then we will create a web application using that data and web map. And then we will look at how to share the information to a specific group of the members of the ArcGIS Online organization. Finally, we will look at the resources available to continue to learn and use this wonderful technology in the next set of workshops in this series. So let's go over what is ArcGIS Online. ArcGIS Online is the world's most popular web geographic information system for mapping, spatial analysis, location intelligence, and data sharing. It is Esri's SaaS offering. By SaaS, I mean software as a service. This is the stats you see on these slides. This is really last year's stats. Over 10 million users worldwide are registered with ArcGIS Online. Over 40 million shared content items on this online system. Trillions of views of the hosted data, maps, and applications. Many of your agencies may already have ArcGIS Online accounts. SCAG is a longtime user of ArcGIS Online. And also SCAG recently released Regional Data Platform, also known as RDP, which is built on ArcGIS Online. For those of you don't currently have ArcGIS Online accounts, you can also access it through SCAG's hub. We will have follow-up trainings for ArcGIS Urban and Hub, which sits on top of ArcGIS Online. That's why we are having this training for you so that you could be successful with using ArcGIS Urban and Hub for your planning workflows. Because ArcGIS Online is a web-based system, you don't need to install any software. All you need is named users to log in and start to work. For storing the data and consuming premium services, you will consume ArcGIS Online credits. Now let's look at ArcGIS Online user interface. As I mentioned, ArcGIS Online is a subscription-based online system. So you will need a named user and password to access the rich functionalities. So the first thing you need to do is to log into ArcGIS Online. To do so, you type arcgis.com into your browser. Then use ArcGIS Online login credentials, the password, for example, to get in. So if you have a set up single sign-on, you'd use ArcGIS Online organization's URL option. If you don't have single sign-on, you just use ArcGIS login. I will show that what I mean in a minute. So for the login information for this workshop, it's using the URL for ArcGIS Online, that's arcgis.com. And the named users was sent to the attendees, and the pattern is urban_student number. passwords. It could be, so for example, urban_student1, urban_students2, and so forth. And the password used for this workshop is cloud GIS 123. And notice that they are case sensitive. So let's try it out. I'm gonna stop my PowerPoint and go to ArcGIS. I go to the browser. So from here, you can see I'm actually currently not signed into ArcGIS Online. So I'm going to sign in. So first thing, like I just mentioned, you would type arcgis.com in the browser, and that will lead you to the ArcGIS Online login page. So you just click on sign in, as I mentioned earlier. So you can either just straight use ArcGIS Online login. See, I'm using the similar login pattern. urban_student 58 is my login name. So as I mentioned, if your organization already has a single sign-on, you might choose the option down below here. Do a drop down here. That's where you can type in the URL you're using. You could also use the social media login to sign up for ArcGIS Online organization. But for this workshop, which is to use the straight ArcGIS Online login, and say sign in. So kind of to follow along with this workshop, make sure you have ArcGIS Online login. So once you log in, then we can start explore the ArcGIS Online user interface. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint here. So once we log into ArcGIS Online, we'll look at the first one. We'll look at a tab in ArcGIS Online environment. It's called ArcGIS Online Organization. So there, for the type of login for you, it's we have like 2 tabs. One is overview, give you the general information about your organization. For example, the subscription ID and some of the recent members and who's the administrator. And also we have another tab called members. From there, you can see all the members, and you can also interact, sort of look at some of the items and what they've created by those members. I will then show the ArcGIS Online admin functionalities. With your login, you don't have access to this functionalities, but it's good to know what the admin users can do. So you can, even though in this case you cannot follow along, but I'll give you a quick overview of how the admin role manages ArcGIS Online so that you have a general idea about what's happening behind the scenes when you put in a request to the administrator. And also your agency might ask you to be an administrator. So you're in your own ArcGIS Online organization. So this is knowledge. So this knowledge will be handy in that case. I will also cover the user role and user type. In addition to that, we'll also look at the settings available to administration, as well as how the licenses for the applications for the users are managed by the administrator. Okay, let's take a look. So back into our ArcGIS Online organizations. In the last session, we logged into ArcGIS Online. We explained about named user and password and so forth. You can see I've logged into my ArcGIS Online. This is my login, and I set up the profile with my picture. So the first thing, as I mentioned, we're going to look at the ArcGIS Online Organization tab. Notice on the top of ArcGIS Online environment, I could see all these different things. So the first thing was going to look at the Organization tab. As I mentioned, there's subscription ID. So what that is important is if you want to reach out to ArcGIS, to Esri's tech support, they might ask you, what is your ArcGIS Online subscription ID, right? So there's a name. You can also put in a logo or icon for your organization, and it reports total number of members and some of the recent content, and also who to contact for if you have any kind of administrative questions, or if you require more licenses, who to contact. So that's the overview tab. If I go to my members tab, I can see that other members, this is me, but there's also information about other members in the organization. And their roles, you can see most of them are publisher type, but there's also some administrators. I see Robin is an administrator here. As I mentioned, I could also view items and groups and profile of other members. So that's the organization for a average user. What type of information you have in there. Now I want to share, as I mentioned, about what an administrator of ArcGIS Online can do. So this is a login where I am an administrator. Let's also go to the organization tab. So you can see clearly there are more information here. Because I'm an administrator, I can see a lot more information. Similar information, the subscription ID, the organization name, and so forth. Now I start to see more information about this organization, when it was created, when is the renew date, and so forth. It also tells me how many user types are available. And from here, you could also see the status of the credits I mentioned earlier for some of the premium services, and also for storing data in ArcGIS Online, you consume credits. So you can see the total remaining credits consumed in the last 30 days, the last 24 hours, and so forth. And also you can see the number of licenses available for this organization. And also notice I have more tabs here under ArcGIS Online General tab. So I have overview. Now, if I go to members, there's more information for me too. You can see members. Now there's credit limit. I guess administrator, I can set credit limits to my users. So I don't want them to just run away, consume too much credits. I can control that. And I can also see last login, the user type. This is similar. And another thing too is I can also control, I could even reassign roles. For example, now Gretchen is an administrator. I could switch her to a user of viewer, which I'm not going to do, but I have the power to do that. And also with this ... control, you can see I have a lot more options just to view about that member. And this licenses tab, which is not available in sort of your login, but you can see now, I can see the type of licenses available. These are ArcGIS Pro, that's a desktop license, and the desktop license extensions. and essential apps. You can see I can use this manage button to assign those to a particular user. Let's go back. Another tab that was not available in your login is the status. So this is about credit usage. And settings, I mentioned settings. This is where you can really control the behavior of your ArcGIS Online organization. So you see their general settings that the administrator can set to get this set up, and how the home page, you want a home page to look like, gallery, maps, and so there are all sorts of things. Again, I'm not the security, that's another key area. But I'm not going to go into the details there. That's just a quick tour of the organization tab of ArcGIS Online. Okay. Now I'm going to start sharing my PowerPoint again. So next, I will walk through ArcGIS Online portal through which you'd be accessing and managing your content. As you can see, gallery on the list. We'll kind of go down quickly. Gallery usually showcases data, maps, and applications the organization want to highlight. This is a good place to share the latest and greatest apps for all the members. The map tab is where you can create and edit a new web map. The scene tab is where you can create and manage your 3D contents. We call it 3D scenes. A content tab is where you manage all your content, your items, right? Items, by items, I'm referring to all the content items you're working with. In terms of item types, there are quite a few item types you can work with. Most common ones are layers. You know, the geographic data sets we typically call layers, like a layer of a map, right? Maps and files. And one of the most common file types for exchanging geospatial data is a shapefile. So shapefile is actually an open standard that was initially created by Esri, but we opened it up, and so a lot of GIS systems can actually read, understand shapefiles. Okay, let's look at the other tabs. We call it ArcGIS Online portals, but so we've looked at the organization tab. You know, now let's kind of quickly go through the other tabs on ArcGIS Online. Home tab, this is where we first log in. I show the ArcGIS Online home, and you can configure to brand for your organization. The second one is a gallery tab. This is where you want to highlight, for example, the new or exciting applications that's shared by someone into this organization. Because this is a workshop ArcGIS Online organization, it's in a way, in terms of the what's being shared here is not necessarily the following the best practices, but typically if we want to share a item, we want to create a meaningful thumbnail rather than using the default. I'll share that, how that's done down below later on. And the map tab, this is where when you click on the map tab, it'll bring up a map viewer. This is where there are tools on the left and right for you to quickly create something we'll call a web map. We're going to talk about more later on. But so basically, when you click on that map tab, it brings you to this map viewer user interface. And notice that the tabs on the top disappears. The reason that the way we design this way is that when we're in a process of making a map, we don't want to accidentally click another tab to sort of get away from our current task. So now let's see. So how do you get back to the user interface where you can see all the tabs? If you look at upper left corner, this 3 bars, or kind of sandwich widget, excuse me, we'll click on that. You can see now some of those tabs that's on the top, now it's available to me. Let's say I want to go to, since I'm at a map tab, I want to go to the scene tab. That's a 3D environment. I'm going to go to the scene tab. And notice that we are now working in a 3D environment. You start with a 3D globe. And from there, you can pick some 3D content, just kind of explore. I won't spend too much time on this particular area because Robin is going to have a ArcGIS Urban workshop specifically focusing on the 3D type of environment. Just quickly, just for exploration, you can see for the navigation of 3D map, use the left button, push it down to pan. And you can use the right button, push down to actually tilt the view of the 3D view. And there's a middle roller. If your mouse has that, you can actually use that to zoom in and out. So similar to the map viewer, once you're in the map, in the 3D scene viewer, you notice that all the top tabs are gone. So again, but upper left, there's this home button. There's a little triangular things for a drop down that allow you to go to other tabs. Let's go to the notebook tab. The notebook tab is for what we call ArcGIS Online notebook server environment. From here, again, I'm not going to spend too much time here, just kind of let you know that if you see that, you know that this is actually for running Python scripts, right? So you can see, look at, currently I don't have a notebook. I can look at the shared notebooks in this ArcGIS Online organization. There's an ArcGIS, Urban API workshop notebook and Esri sample notebook. So these are all basically Python script. You can use that to automate tasks for your administration, or you can use that to even run sophisticated AI tools. Okay. And next, we'll look at the Groups tab. And the groups are a great way to share information to a specific set of people you want to share with them, right? And you can see I already have some groups being created. And we're going to talk more about this later on. Content, we're going to come back to this tab again and again. So this is actually showing the content of the items I've created. Notice, excuse me, the title of my items and what type. Are they feature layer? Are they shapefile, web maps, and so forth? And when they were created. So we'll come back to this many times to really manage and create content here. Okay, so that is a quick, kind of really a quick tour of the ArcGIS Online portal. Essentially, with the organization and also in the other tabs, you get a sense of what is your user interface for ArcGIS Online. Okay, let's go back to my slide. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at how to bring data into ArcGIS Online, which is the ending content into ArcGIS Online. To understand the data loading process in ArcGIS Online, we're going to get some data from SCAG's helper tool. I have the URL on this slide. So the reason that we're doing this is because there's some really cool data that's available for the whole SCAG region. So it's a great data source for this exercise. I think it's also a useful application for the planners like yourselves to know. For the sake of time, we'll create a small subset of data to download and then download them as a shapefile, which is, as I mentioned earlier, is an OpenGIS standard data format that many GIS systems can recognize. So let's look at this helper tool. So for some of you probably are already aware if you follow the SCAG RDP project. It's being recently released to the public. And this tool has been, this is actually 2.0 version. So this is really for housing element parcel tools, parcel selection, parcel exploration. So you can actually filter. So I'm going to look for a small community so that I'm not dealing with a huge amount of data. Actually, before that, I want to really quickly show that, say, when I show the all data when it's first log in, you can see that I have like 5 million records, right? So that's where I want to filter down to a smaller data set so that you can quickly go through the exercise. So you can see that right off the bat, when I select the community of Blythe, the number of selected parcels dropped from 5 million to a little over 5,000. I can even further narrow down by look at, say, vacant parcels of appropriate size. That narrows down to 254 records. So now I'm good with that. I'm going to download that. You can download either as CSV file or as a download as shape file. So I want to download it as a zipped shape file. When I click on that, it starts downloading. So while that is working on that downloading part, let's talk about how we're going to do with this data. So I'm going to again share my PowerPoint. So once the data is downloaded, we can then upload it to our ArcGIS Online. As you can see from the screenshot, you can bring data from various sources. It can be from your machine or from Google Drive or Dropbox or OneDrive and so forth. We will add the shapefile you just created from the helper tool. Then we will set a thumbnail to bring it. So that's recommended best practices, right? And you want to make sure that you assign a meaningful thumbnail to help other users to see what it is instead of just leaving with the default thumbnail, the thumbnail image. So one thing I want also to point out is that if you try to add an Excel spreadsheet, because here, remember, when we download it, you can either download the spreadsheet or CSV file or download as a shape file. So if you want to add Excel spreadsheet or CSV file with address information and choose converting to an editable layer, we call feature layer, it will use Esri's world geocoding services and it will consume credits if you don't have a custom geocoding services set up. Just want to bring this up to make you aware of it, because we have some customers who went through that process and burned up all the 500 credits assigned to them from SCAG. Okay, so let's go to ArcGIS Online now. The data has been downloaded. I go back to my content here, and I can start create some new items. In this upper left, you see new item. So I'm going to click on that. You see the options. I can bring in the data. And what I'm going to do is just from your, see, I'm uploading that data I got from the helper tool. Notice this is the one I just uploaded. So what I'll do is I'm going to pick, there's the previous one, but either way, one thing I want to point out is if you're downloading this data repeatedly, sometimes you might have a similar file name you want to change. So in this one, I changed this one. I downloaded earlier, changed to a slight different name, because sometimes you might have the conflict name. If it's exact the same as zip file name, you might have a conflict. Just want to point that out. So now once I pick the file, it recognizes that it's a shape file. And then it's asks you, how would you like to add this shape file, right? You can either add in and create a hosted feature layer, or add into just as a zip file only. So you want the first option, because that allows you to create dynamic maps, not apps. Whereas if you just upload as a zip file, it's just stored the file, so you cannot really work with it. So that's why we want to use the first option. Next, we're gonna give a name, title. So I'm gonna say Blythe parcel data layer, call that. And also another thing too is it's going to require you to add a tag, which is best practice, because that way all the other members in this organization could easily locate your data. Another thing I want to point out is you could also store information into whatever folders, right? See, this is my username. So urban_student58, that is the default folder. You can create a new folder or use other existing folders. So again, gonna just stay with the default folder. And of course, you want to add a meaningful summary. For the sake of time, I'm just going to use the same as title, but in your real work, make sure you actually use a meaningful description. So now this is publishing the surveys. And once it's published, it kicks us to this information page for this new layer you've just added. You can see it says a feature layer, host feature layer by me, the username. And as I mentioned, this thumbnail, the default thumbnail, kind of screen captures what the data look like. So I want to actually bring something that's more meaningful for that. So I'm going to browse to a folder I created for this training. So I'm going to go to my SCAG folder and training folder. From there, I have saved a Blythe image. Can bring that for thumbnail. Notice I can actually zoom it to make it look nice and save that. So that's a best practice. You want meaningful thumbnails. And also in this information page, you can actually start to explore the data you just brought into ArcGIS Online. This is overview tab, give you some information, but there's also, you can explore the data behind it. Look at the table. behind this, all this parcel data. You could also, because we brought in as a zip shapefile published as a feature layer, now we can actually visualize that spatially, see the actual parcel location on top of a base map. Another tab is called usage. So this is where, since we just brought that in, we had never been published to anyone. So nobody could actually access this data. So that's why the request at the spirit's a 0, of course. You could also set up some settings. And one thing is, let's say I want to make this data sets editable, right? So enable editing, and there's options, what kind of things you can do, what kind of editing is allowed, add, delete, update, and so forth, so on. I'm going to save that. So that's you can see that's pretty nice. Now we have a data we just brought in. We can start to work with it. Okay, share my PowerPoint again. Now I'm gonna actually talk about creating a map. Because we now bring in the data, we want to actually create a web map. So you might say, what is a web map? An ArcGIS Online web map is an interactive display of geographic information that you can use to tell stories and answer questions. For example, you may find or create a map that addresses the question, how many people in the United States live within a reasonable walk or drive distance to a supermarket, right? So in this step, we're going to first open the layer into map viewer. We briefly touched on the map viewer. Then we'll pick a base map that you like, or I like, and then we're gonna style the parcel polygons. And then we also configure pop-up, because typically when you have a web map, you want the users to be able to interact with the information. And one great way to show that information is through pop-up. Okay, let's do it. Now I'm going to go back to, actually, we're still on this information page for the layer we just created. So you can see that I can now start by I can say open this feature layer in map viewer. That'll bring up the map viewer user interface. And from there, we could start to build this web map. We've seen this briefly. You can see there's a map in this area here. And then on both sides, we have tools to help us build this map. Okay. So let's zoom in, we can see the parcel boundaries better rather than just some dots almost early, at the beginning. And let's look at the tools here. You can see one thing is I want to make sure that I actually am selecting this particular layer. This is called symbolize parcel data layer. And notice there's kind of repeated information, which I don't really like. So I can use this ... widget to bring up more functions. As you can see, I can zoom to, show properties, and so forth. I'm going to rename this. Let's say I'm going to cut out the unnecessary, redundant information, delete that, and say, OK. Notice my layer is now clean. Nice. And let's go through on the left. We can see there's tables, base maps. I mentioned about base maps. So you can see currently the default base map is we call that topographic base map. We could switch to different base maps. You can see you can use the imagery base map or imagery hybrid, which includes the imagery and transportation data such as highways, freeways, and labels, street labels. Or if I want really focusing on transportation layers, I can use streets as base map. So we're going to come back to topographic base map. That's the default. We're going to stay with that default. I can also look at the legend. So right now we only have one symbol, one kind of blue color for all the polygons. So there's no, just one polygon for the legend, right? You can create bookmarks and so forth. So now what I want to do is actually set a property, set a style of the layer. So on the right-hand side, you can click on this tool. At this point, it's actually not active. So one thing you can do is make sure that the layer is selected, right? So one way you can bring up that, notice now when I click on this layer, now I have Blythe property layer shows up and this pop up. Now it's activated, right? Just say I'll just toggle a couple times to show that. So from here, you can see that's the symbology. It's a single color symbology. So everyone has the same value. So we can say, I want to actually change that. To change that, you say edit layer style. That brings me up more tools, right? You can see, again, this is just one single style. So showing one color. If I want to, I can actually change that color, right? So for now, it's if I use this pencil, say I want to actually change that color to some other color, you can do that. Let's say purplish, done. But now what I really want to do is I want to actually distinguish those parcels. I don't want them to be all in the same color, right? To change that, you need to choose a field. And here's choose attribute, right? So the first thing you need to do is add a field. As I click on that add field, I can see there's all the field information and the field names, city. What I want to do is really using the city's zoning code. Let me see if I can find that now. Maybe I missed it. There it is. City zoning code. Add that field. Now notice that, oh, you want to symbolize or style your data according to that zoning code. We have this feature called smart mapping. It automatically figured out, give you a different set of colors for different type of zoning types. So if you click on this style options, that'll help you. You can actually pick different color ramps. So this is the one that was chosen for me, but I can change to something else. Say I would like this pattern better, or this one, whatever you like, and pick that. And then say done. And click done again, so that option is being saved. So you can see now I have unique colors for my parcels. Notice if I now go back to the legend on the left, you can see now the legend indicating what those color means for those zoning types. And the next thing I want to do is set up the pop-ups. And this part, this is the viewer I really like. This part of the new tool of this new viewers really like. I really like it because it actually shows what's exactly happening. What's exactly happening as I make changes in this property. So to change the pop-up, I would go to Fields List. And you can see from here, you can select fields. So if I click on that, I can select all. You can see all fields are selected, including FID, which is really not what I want. When I click select all, I can also deselect all. What I want to do is just turn all fields off. You can see that now there's only a title, right? Now I can pick only a few things I care about. Now maybe I care about acres. I care about APN. Notice as I pick those fields, that pop-up sample there on the left start to show up, right? APN. I want a city name. I want a city zoning code. I want the county. And say that's all I need for now. So say done. Now I configured my pop-up. So now if I actually click on a parcel, and it shows the fields that I chose earlier. Okay, let's go to my slides to go to the next section. Now that we have created a web map, the next thing to do is find a way to share it with others. You can share them in many, many ways. One of them is create a web application. Now, before I move on though, I do want to spend a little time talking about web map, right? So what you just seen that, you pick a base map, you pick in our case, we picked a parcel data set. And so we call that like operational layer. So those are, and then we created configured the pop-up and excuse me. And then we also configured the styles, right? So all that is a web map. You can view in the map viewer. So next thing is we're going to create an application. So you might say, well, what is a web application? It is an application that runs on a web browser. You might ask, can I share just a web map out? And we'll create a web map, which has a base map and has parcels. Can I just share that out? Well, the answer is yes, you can, but it's limited. You can embed your web map in another web application, or if you give someone the URL of your web map, and they'd have to open ArcGIS Online map viewer to actually view your web map, right? So that person may be unfamiliar with the ArcGIS Online UI. They'll be lost if you give that, right? So the best way to share your web map is to build a web application with specific tools for specific purposes. So there are many ways to create a web application. Today, we're going to just use the simplest approach. It's called ArcGIS Instant App, ArcGIS Instant App. So we're going to use zone lookup web app template to quickly create a parcel lookup application using the data we extracted from SCAG's helper tool. Then we will configure the tools for parser lookup web application, configure the app, and then publish the application. And then after that, we'll just quickly explore the app, actually, how the application works from a user's perspective. Okay, let's try it out. So now I am in this map viewer. And before we move on to create a web app, I want to point out something. So you can see I highlighted the URL. You can see the first part of URL is urbanworkshop.maps.arcgis.com. So this is the ArcGIS Online organization. And it says apps, map viewer. So basically you're loading this into a map viewer. So that's why I was saying earlier that if you just give this URL, this is the web map URL. If you give to your friend and also make this say public so that he can access. So what happens is it's going to load this application into this map viewer, which is great when you know how it works. But for someone who's entirely new to GIS or ArcGIS Online, they would be confused, how to even use this, right? Another thing I want to point out is there is this layer ID, right? That's also part of the identity, or a GUID identifies this web map. So let's close that. And the first thing is I want to save this web map I created earlier, right? So I'm going to do save as, call it live parcel web map. So this is a web map. I'm going to just name it that way again. As usual, always provide a meaningful tag and meaningful description, and also specify where you want to save in your content folder. I'm going to use the default folder, which is urban_user58. I'm going to save that map. So now actually, this is where I want to show this. Now, since I've saved that web map, I have that web map ID. So actually, the ID I was showing earlier was really because I have that active layer. That was a layer ID. So this is a web map ID. Okay, so now I have this web map saved. I'm going to create an application and really share that out. You can see there's on the left, there's this create app. If I click on that, there are all these different options. You can create an instant app, or you can create an app using Experience Builder, Story Map, Dashboard, and so forth. So that gives you some, you can see there's all these options, right? So I kind of described what a web application is. So let's actually look at some examples of web application built by different tools. So one option is to create an experience builder. I want to actually go back to this application we used earlier, SCAG's RDP helper tool for housing element parcel tool, right? Remember, we used this to narrow down to the parcels we care, and we downloaded that. All these tools and this map, this user interface, this is a great example of a web application built using Experience Builder. So that's something, again, we don't have time to go to details about Experience Builder, but Experience Builder is really a great tool to create web applications. You can see all the tools. So instead of giving someone that web map URL, now we can give them this web application URL. We have predefined user interface that's very straightforward for the user to figure out, right? So that's a great example of a web application built by Experience Builder. Next, and also remember, you've heard a dashboard. You can build a dashboard application from that web map. Just to give you some ideas, here's an example of a dashboard. In this case, for the city of Kenosha, look at their development projects. And so you have location, a map showing the locations of those projects, and also have a chart showing the development by type and development stages, right? So that's a great example of a dashboard. Here's another example of a ArcGIS dashboard for real estate sales, right? Again, you have a spatial map showing the location of the sales, and you have the statistics about the sales in this community. And also you have a chart about the number of sales per school districts, right? So those are two good examples of dashboard that you can build. And here's an example of story map. You mentioned that you can kind of scroll through that tells you a story using maps, texts, animation, and so forth to really tell a compelling story. So you can build this type of application. In this case, it's about the zoning map for Boyle Heights, right? So with that, so now we have an idea of what web applications are. We're going to now build a web, very, very simplistic application called Instant App. Those are the easiest you can build in ArcGIS Online. So now I select Build Instant Apps. You can see now I'm presented with the templates for those instant apps, basic ones, cut down, interact legend, so forth. As I mentioned, I'm going to pick a zone lookup. You can preview, or say I'm going to go with that, use that template to build a very simplistic parcel lookup application. Now I'm going to give a title. Now this is, remember the previous, we're building this based on a web map, but this is actually I'm going to call Blythe Parcel Lookup Web App, kind of describe what it is we're working on. And I'm going to delete the old tag because that's referencing to a web map. I'm going to call that a web app and save in the folder, use the default folder with my login urban_students 558 and say, go ahead, create app. So now it's creating all the components of that web application. Again, you can see that to create a web application, you don't need to be a web developer. We have this template to help you quickly set it up, right? So you can see there are 5 steps to create this map. So the step 1 is select a map to display your app. Right now, we actually, because we started with a web map, it's using the web map that started with. But if you were to change, you can go in there and select a different map. But we're okay with that. You can tell us. So here, there's information about this particular web map, right? So we're good with that. We say go back. And then the information, remember this here, we have this panel on the left. We can configure that. It's called About Panel. The app title is Blythe Parcel Lookup Web App. That's what we just specified. But we can change that. Let's say I'm going to change to by Justin Fan. I hit enter. Look, notice that the title's already changed there. We could have, so there's an introduction here. We can add an introduction here. So say showcasing instant app. If I hit enter, you see that title shows up in this about panel. I could also, you can see there's default text provided for you. For this part, I can actually change that, right? Say I'm just quick, I want to change the last bullet to bold and italic and say, okay. Notice that's been changed. You can see that's really easy to do. What you see is what you get approach. You can look at step 3. You can layers to including the results. You can select that and go back. Step 4. We're going to just use the default for this, look for geocoding services and so forth. And step 5, we'll look at themes, right? Right now, you can see you can different mode, whether dark mode or light modes. Defaults light mode, and we can switch back to light mode. You can see the difference there. And in terms of where the widgets are positioned, right now it's upper right. You see the zoom control and the home button. We're going to just leave them there. And then from there, let's say we're good with the configuration of this application. We're going to go ahead and publish. When we publish, we basically are creating this application. Now, publish doesn't mean that we're changing, who can see. So at this point, the application, you're still shared only to yourself, to myself, right? And let's say I want to see how I could embed that. So if this is the code, I can embed this application to a iframe to another application. If you want to, I just copy that, send to another developer to embed that, right? Now to actually see how this application works, I'm going to launch it. So another tab in the browser starts to show, and this is the application. If you share to the user, they could start to see it, right? So you can see the changes I've made, and now shows up there. Now let's see how it works, right? So I could type in, find an address of a parcel, but I really don't know this area that well, so I can interactively select a parcel. And now it's the results page that shows up, right? In this case, you can see also the results page is configured according to how I configured my pop-up. Remember, these are 4 fields I decided to use in my pop-up. So I've configured that. See, I can also switch between my about panel and my results panel as I select that application. So that's just, you can see it's a pretty simplistic application, but that's just a quick tour of how you can easily using one of our application templates to create a web application. Okay, let's go back to my PowerPoint. Next, we're talking about how to share information. There are many ways to share your data, web maps, and web apps to your colleagues or general public. For example, you can share it to everyone. In that case, everyone is the world. So that means that everyone in the world can access your information. Another common way of sharing is that you only want to share the information to a selected group. That's done by a group sharing ArcGIS Online. For example, in a city's ArcGIS Online organization, you could create a group for each department. For example, a group for Public Works Department, a group for Parks and Rec Departments, a group for Police Department, a group for Fire, and so on and so forth, right? So now we will create a group and share the applications we just created in that group. And then you can invite other members into that group. And when that happens, then all the members in that group can access the information being shared in that group. So the first thing is we're going to create a group and then share the app and data to that group. And then the next thing is, oh, okay, another thing too, I want to point out this app launcher tool in ArcGIS Online that actually, that's where you actually launch the applications such as ArcGIS Urban, ArcGIS Business Analyst, and ArcGIS Hub from ArcGIS Online. Okay, let's do it. Let me bring up my browser again. So now I'm going to go back to my ArcGIS Online organization. Notice we're still in this map viewer. Now we want to go back to my content to, first of all, to see whether I have created that web app we've gone through, whether that would show up in the content. To go back to content again, I go up to the upper left corner with the sandwich widget. You can see now all my tabs are available. Let's go to content tab. Notice that we have this Blythe parcel lookup web app. It's being created on today's date. It is an instant app. Also earlier, I forgot to show, but also you can see that we created that Blythe parcel web map. It shows up as a web map, again, today's date. Similarly, the Blythe parcel data layer we created earlier, that's a hosted feature layer, shows the date, right? So we're all good. Now I want go to groups. Remember, we want to create a group sharing. I want to show how to share through the group. So remember, we've been to this tab before with all the groups. So I'm going to create a group by go upper left, look at create a group, click on that. And I'm going to give a name, say Justin Fan Group, give a group name. So whatever name that you want to, some meaningful, right? If I'm creating a group for PD, I'm going to say police department. If I'm creating a group for assessors, I'm going to say assessors department, right? Again, provide a meaningful description and meaningful tag. And I'm going to upload an image from my group as well for the thumbnail. Remember that you always want to brand your groups and items in a meaningful way. In this case, this group's related to Blythe. Again, I'm going to do a Blythe image, but I can zoom to a slight different extent so that it is somewhat different from the previous one. Okay, like the peak over there. Save that. And here I want to also specify some characteristics for this group, right? In terms of group membership, the default is everyone public. So I probably do not want that to be the case, because that that kind of defeat the purpose. If it's shared to this group, it means shared to everyone, right? I want to maybe only group members could view content in this group. Now, who can be in this group? Could be my organization's members only. In that case, only, in this case, will be that only the members in this ArcGIS Urban workshop members could join or can be in this group. Or I could invite members who have a collaboration set up with this ArcGIS Online organization, right? That's another option. Or I could say any organization's members, I can invite them in there. I like that because I want to invite other members, members from other ArcGIS Online organization into my group to share content just outside of my own organization. One caveat to be aware is that in this case, the member that I'm inviting in to this organization, that member has to set their profile to public so that I can invite them. Otherwise, I would have no visibility, right? How can people join this group? There's only one option, by invitation. And who can contribute content? It's all group members or group owner and manager. I would say all group members. Say, okay, I'm happy with that group settings. I'm going to save that. Now you see I have created a group with a very nice looking thumbnail. I can start to invite users here. Let's say, actually, I want to invite some users. Say I'm going to invite Urban 1, Urban 10, and so forth, those 3, and add those members to my group. Now, if I go to members, I should see those members in my group. If I want to change the settings of that group, again, I can change the settings that I initially set up when I created a group. Content, nothing has been shared. I could add items to group, or I could go to my content here to bring in to share items. So let's say to share the items. So now let's say I want to share this Blythe parcel lookup web map to the group I just created, right? I can select that group and I say share. I want to see currently it's shared only to the owner, which is myself, right? Nobody else could see. If I say share to organization, then every member in this ArcGIS Online organization could see my web application. Or share to everyone, that means share to the public. Everybody in the world now could see it. So let's say I don't want to do that. I don't want to share to organization yet, but I want to share to a particular group. So let's edit group sharing. And notice I have this Justin Fan group for sharing that I just created. I want to share this web application to this, right? So let's say okay. And then I say save that sharing. And now it's kind of asking me something. You said, okay, you want to share this web app to this group, but that group is actually made up of 2 things. One is the Blythe parcel web map, and also underlying that web map is Blythe parcel data layer. So if you just share the app without sharing underlying data, the users could get to the app, but they could not actually see the data. So you want to update so that both the web map and the data layer are also being shared to that group. So let's update that. Okay, now let's go back to my group here. I want to see this Justin group for sharing. Again, this is the information page. Now I can see recent added content shows up. You can see all three are now shared to this group. Or if I go to content, you can see all those as being shared. So group sharing is a great way to share information, data information content with your colleagues. And also this is a group security in a sense, right? If you, let's say that you created an application, you're not ready to share to the whole organization or to the public, you want to share to a smaller group of people, you can use the group mechanism to only share with them before you share to a larger audience. Okay, let's go back to my slides. I think that's pretty much all the follow along kind of sessions. Now, finally, I want to share some resources. And the first one is the ArcGIS introductory video. This one covers the same topics for this workshop. You can review it to reinforce what we've just learned today. And also next are the 2 learn lessons. These 2 learn lessons for ArcGIS Online are also really good for you to go through as exercises. And finally, there are quite a few tools in SCAG RTP website's RTP Planners Corner. We will also make the recording of this workshop available for you to review later. And finally, I want to share the information, date, and time for the upcoming workshops for ArcGIS Business Analyst, ArcGIS Urban, and ArcGIS Hub. So that's the end of this recording. Thank you for reviewing this ArcGIS Online workshop. Bye.